He looked her dead in the eye and said, "Without me, you are nothing but a waitress with a wrinkled face." Benedict thought he held all the cards. He had the high-powered lawyers, the hidden offshore accounts, and the younger mistress waiting in the car. He thought his wife, Clara, was just a quiet, simple woman he'd rescued from poverty 10 years ago. He was wrong. Dead wrong. He didn't know that the woman he was trying to destroy wasn't just Clara, the housewife. She was a sleeping giant, and when her family finally walked through those courtroom doors, Benedict wouldn't just lose his money. He would realize he had been living in a house owned by the very people he was trying to rob. This is the story of the divorce that shook New York's elite. The penthouse on 57th Street was so quiet you could hear the hum of the climate control system, a soft purr that usually signaled comfort. Tonight, it sounded like a countdown. Clara Reynolds sat on the edge of the beige velvet sofa, her hands folded tightly in her lap. She was wearing a simple grey cardigan, one she'd bought at Target 3 years ago. It had a small hole in the cuff she kept meaning to darn, but she never got around to it. Benedict hated when she mended things. "Throw it out, Clara," he'd say. "We're not poor. Stop acting like it." But tonight, Benedict wasn't looking at her cardigan. He was looking at his watch, a Patek Philippe Nautilus that cost more than the house Clara grew up in. Or at least, the house he thought she grew up in. "Are you listening to me?" Benedict's voice was sharp, cutting through the silence. He was pacing in front of the floor-to-ceiling windows that overlooked Central Park, a glass of scotch in his hand. Clara looked up. "I'm listening, Ben." "I don't think you are," he sneered. He walked over to the coffee table and tossed a thick manila envelope onto the glass surface. It landed with a heavy, final thud. "Those are the papers. I've been generous, more generous than my lawyers advised." Clara didn't reach for them. She knew what they were. The rumors had been swirling for months, the late nights at the office, the smell of perfume that wasn't hers, something sharp and floral, like expensive lilies. The way he'd started locking his phone, turning the screen face down whenever he entered a room. "You're leaving me," Clara stated flatly. It wasn't a question. Benedict laughed, a dry, humorless sound. "I'm upgrading, Clara. Let's call it what it is. Look at you." He gestured vaguely at her, his hand waving dismissively at her lack of makeup, her pulled-back hair, her silence. "You've stopped trying. I'm the CEO of Helios Tech. I'm on the cover of Forbes. And you're still the same terrified little mouse I found serving coffee in that diner in Vermont." That was the narrative Benedict loved, the savior narrative. In his mind, he had plucked Clara from obscurity, dusted her off, and given her a life of luxury she didn't deserve. He loved to remind her of it at dinner parties, chuckling as he told guests, "She didn't even know what an oyster fork was when I met her." "I cooked your dinner, Ben," Clara said softly. "The roast is resting." "I'm not eating here," Benedict snapped. "I'm meeting Jessica." Jessica. He didn't even try to hide the name anymore. Jessica Vane. Clara knew her. Everyone knew her. She was a junior partner at Hayes & Cromwell, the shark-like law firm that handled Helios Tech's litigation. She was 28, viciously intelligent, and possessed the kind of beauty that looked expensive because it was. "Jessica thinks I should give you nothing," Benedict continued, taking a sip of his scotch. "She says the prenup is ironclad. You get the Honda, $50,000 in cash, and you move out by Friday." Clara's eyes widened slightly. "Friday. Ben, that's 3 days away. Where am I supposed to go?" "Back to Vermont, or maybe a shelter." "I don't care, Clara." He slammed the glass down, liquid sloshing over the rim. "The point is, this apartment is mine. The Hamptons house is mine. The accounts are mine. You contributed nothing. You sat here, reading books and gardening on the terrace while I built an empire." He leaned in close, his cologne overpowering her senses. "Sign the papers. Take the 50 grand. If you fight me, Jessica will bury you in legal fees until you're begging for change on the subway. Do you understand?" Clara looked at the envelope. $50,000. For 10 years of marriage. For nursing him through his bout of pneumonia when the company almost went under. For hosting his investors, smoothing over his temper tantrums, and playing the role of the doting invisible wife. She reached out and took the envelope. Her hands were trembling, but not from fear. "I understand, Ben," she whispered. "Good." He straightened his suit jacket, checking his reflection in the window. "I'll send the movers on Friday at noon. Be gone before then." He turned and walked toward the elevator that opened directly into the penthouse. As the door slid open, he paused. "Oh, and Clara, leave the jewelry. I bought it. It's an asset." The doors closed and he was gone. Clara sat in the silence for a long time. The city lights twinkled below, indifferent to her heartbreak. Slowly the trembling in her hands stopped. Her posture, usually slumped to make herself look smaller beside Benedict, straightened. She stood up and walked to the window, looking at her reflection. The mouse, the waitress, the nobody. She reached into her pocket and pulled out a phone. Not the iPhone Benedict monitored, but a small black burner phone she kept hidden inside a hollowed-out book in the library. She dialed a number she hadn't called in 12 years. It rang once. Twice. A deep, gravelly voice answered. "Report. It's done, Uncle Silas," Clara said, her voice completely different, cold, precise, and devoid of the meekness she had worn like a costume for a decade. "He served the papers." "Did he offer the settlement?" the voice asked. 50,000, and he wants me out by Friday." There was a low chuckle on the other end of the line. It was a terrifying sound. 50,000. That wouldn't even cover the fuel for the jet to get to New York. "He's bringing Jessica Vane into it," Clara added. "The lawyer? Cute. We'll eat her for breakfast." "I'm ready to come out of the dark, Silas," Clara said, watching the lights of the city. "Initiate Protocol 4. Call the firm and tell Grandfather. Tell him I'm sorry I'm late." "Welcome back, Miss Blackwood," Silas said. "We'll see you in court." Clara hung up and dropped the phone onto the velvet sofa. She looked at the manila envelope Benedict had thrown at her. She didn't open it. Instead, she walked to the kitchen, took the roast out of the oven, and scraped the entire thing into the trash. The mouse was dead. The lioness was awake. The next 3 days were a masterclass in cruelty. Benedict didn't just want a divorce, he wanted a demolition. He had frozen Clara's credit cards by the next morning. When she went to the pharmacy to pick up a prescription for her migraines, the card was declined. The pharmacist, a woman who had known Clara for 5 years, looked at her with pity. "I'm sorry, Mrs. Reynolds. It says, reported stolen." Clara had to pay with the crumpled $20 bill she kept in her coat pocket. When she returned to the penthouse, the locks had been changed on the master bedroom. Benedict's assistant, a nervous young man named Timothy, was waiting in the foyer. "Mr. Reynolds asked me to supervise your packing, ma'am," Timothy stammered, looking at his shoes. "He's concerned about asset misappropriation." Clara looked at the boy. "Asset misappropriation? I'm packing my underwear, Timothy. Does Benedict want to inventory that too?" Timothy turned bright red. "I'm just following orders, Mrs. Reynolds. Please." Clara packed in silence. She took only what she had bought with her own meager allowance, or what she had made. The knitted blankets, her books, the cheap watercolors she used to paint the view of the park. She left the diamond earrings, The Cartier watch, the designer gowns Benedict insisted she wear to galas. She left them all laid out on the bed like a corpse, ready for viewing. On Friday morning, the day of the eviction, the elevator dinged. Clara expected the movers. Instead, Jessica Vane walked in. She was stunning, aggressive, and wearing a white power suit that cost more than the settlement Clara had been offered. She didn't look at the apartment. She looked at Clara as if she were a stain on the carpet. "Clara," Jessica said, her voice dripping with faux sweetness. "Ben asked me to come by and do a final walkthrough. Make sure the place is presentable for the real estate agents." Clara zipped up her single battered suitcase. "It's clean, Jessica. I scrubbed the floors myself. Habit, I suppose?" Jessica laughed, walking over to inspect a crystal vase. "God, it's so sad. You really thought you could keep him, didn't you? A man like Benedict needs a partner, Clara, a mental equal, not a domestic." She turned to Clara, her eyes flashing. "By the way, we're filing a motion to expedite. We want this done in 30 days. If you sign the waiver today, Ben says he'll add another 10 grand, enough to get you a nice trailer somewhere." Clara looked at Jessica. She saw the ambition, the hunger. She recognized it because she had grown up surrounded by sharks far bigger than Jessica Vane. "I'm not signing anything, Jessica," Clara said calmly. "My lawyer will be in touch." Jessica scoffed. "Your lawyer? Who did you hire? Some strip mall ambulance chaser? Clara, please. Hayes and Cromwell will crush anyone you can afford. Don't embarrass yourself." "We'll see," Clara said. She grabbed the handle of her suitcase. "Wait," Jessica said, snapping her fingers. "Hand over the keys, and the key fob for the building." Clara dropped the keys into Jessica's outstretched hand. "Goodbye, Clara," Jessica smirked. "Don't forget to cancel your mail. We don't want your bills cluttering up our foyer." Clara walked to the elevator. As the doors closed, she saw Jessica pull out her phone, presumably to text Benedict that the trash had been taken out. Clara took the elevator down to the lobby. The doorman, Henry, rushed over to help her. "Mrs. Reynolds, are you traveling?" Henry asked, looking concerned at the single suitcase and her pale face. "I'm leaving, Henry," Clara said. She reached into her purse and handed him an envelope. Inside was $500, cash she had saved by skimming from the grocery budget for years. "Thank you for always being kind to me." "Mrs. Reynolds, I can't. Take it, please." She walked out of the gold-plated revolving doors of the building and onto 57th Street. It was raining, a cold, miserable New York drizzle. Benedict had expected her to hail a cab or maybe walk to the subway. He wanted her to feel the cold. But as Clara stepped onto the curb, a car pulled up. It wasn't a yellow taxi. It wasn't an Uber. It was a black Rolls-Royce Phantom, extended wheelbase, with flags on the fender that didn't belong to any country, but to a corporation so old it operated like a sovereign state. The windows were tinted so dark they looked like oil. The rear door opened before the car even came to a full stop. A man in a dark grey suit stepped out, holding a large black umbrella. He moved with the precision of ex-military. "Miss Blackwood," the man said, bowing his head slightly. He didn't call her Mrs. Reynolds. "Hello, Andrew," Clara said. "Your grandfather is waiting at the estate," Andrew said, taking her suitcase with one hand and holding the umbrella over her with the other. "And Mr. Thorne from the legal team is already on the jet." Clara slid into the back seat. The interior smelled of aged leather and cedar, the smell of real, old money. She settled back into the seat, watching the rain streak against the glass. She saw Benedict walking out of the building lobby, laughing into his phone, likely on his way to meet Jessica. He glanced at the Rolls-Royce, his eyes lingering on it with envy. He admired the car. He had no idea his wife was inside it. "Drive, Andrew," Clara said. The car pulled away silently, merging into the traffic. Benedict Reynolds thought he had just evicted a waitress. He had no idea he had just declared war on the Blackwood Consortium. Most people in New York knew the name Blackwood only from the history books or the plaques on hospital wings. They were the invisible billionaires. They didn't appear on reality TV. They didn't do interviews. They owned the steel mills in the 1920s, the shipping lines in the 50s, and the fiber optics in the 90s. They were the money behind the money. And Clara wasn't just a Blackwood. She was the sole heiress. She had walked away from the family 10 years ago, wanting to find real love without her fortune getting in the way. She thought she found it in Benedict. She had been wrong. Now she was returning to the fold, and the first order of business wasn't charity. It was revenge. 2 weeks later, the day of the preliminary hearing arrived. It was a Tuesday, crisp and bright, the kind of day Benedict Reynolds usually loved because it felt like a day for winning. He sat in the back of his Mercedes S-Class. He had to downgrade from the Maybach since the corporate accounts were temporarily under review, a glitch he blamed on his CFO, and checked his reflection in the rearview mirror. He looked perfect. Charcoal suit, tie knotted in a flawless Windsor, hair swept back with just enough product to look effortless. Beside him, Jessica Vane was scrolling through her iPad, tapping furiously with a perfectly manicured nail. "It's going to be a slaughter, Ben," she said, not looking up. I looked up the lawyer on the docket, someone named A. Graves. Never heard of him. Probably some solo practitioner operating out of a basement in Queens. We'll offer the 50,000 again, maybe throw in the Honda just to be nice. And if they refuse, I'll bury them in discovery requests until they suffocate. Benedict smirked. "Just make sure she cries. I want her to realize what a mistake she made walking out on me." "Oh, she'll cry," Jessica promised, flashing a predatory smile. They arrived at the New York Supreme Court building on Center Street. They bypassed the security line, flashing their attorney badges and VIP passes, striding through the marble hallways like they owned the building. When they entered courtroom 4B, it was empty except for the bailiff and the court stenographer. Benedict took his seat at the plaintiff's table, stretching his legs out. He checked his watch. 9:00 a.m. "They're late," Benedict scoffed. Typical. Probably couldn't afford the subway fare. "No, and I know war. Just 9:02 a.m. The door to the judge's chambers opened, and Judge Fredrickson walked in. He was an old, irritable man, known for hating wasted time. He looked at the empty defense table and frowned. "Ms. Vane," the judge grumbled. "Where is the opposing counsel?" "I have no idea, Your Honor." Jessica stood up, smoothing her skirt. Perhaps they realized the futility of contesting the prenup and decided to... Boom! The heavy double doors at the back of the courtroom didn't just open, they were thrown wide. The room went silent. Entering the room wasn't a single, disheveled lawyer. It was a phalanx. 6 men and women in matching black suits walked in perfect formation, their footsteps echoing in unison on the hardwood floor. They moved with a terrifying, synchronized precision. At the front of the V formation walked a man who looked like he had been carved out of granite. He was older, perhaps in his 60s, with silver hair and eyes that looked like chips of ice. He wore a bespoke 3-piece suit that made Benedict's charcoal suit look like it came from a discount rack. He carried no briefcase, only a single, thin folder. Jessica froze. Her mouth opened slightly, then closed. She recognized the man. Every lawyer in New York knew the face, but few had ever seen him in person, because he didn't take cases. He took wars. It was Alistair Graves, the managing partner of Graves, Hallow & Oates, the firm that represented sovereigns, oil cartels, and the Vatican. They build by the heartbeat. My apologies for the delay, Your Honor, Alistair Graves said. His voice was smooth, deep, and filled the room without him raising it. The security downstairs had trouble processing my team's clearance. We don't usually visit this level of the court system. He walked to the defense table. He didn't sit. He simply placed the thin folder on the table and turned to look at Benedict. Benedict felt a chill run down his spine. This wasn't a mall lawyer. This man looked like he executed people for sport. Mr. Graves, the judge stammered, clearly caught off guard. I wasn't aware you were handling domestic cases. I don't, Your Honor, Graves said, buttoning his jacket. But I make exceptions for the Blackwood family. Benedict frowned. Blackwood? Who is Blackwood? He whispered to Jessica. Who is he talking about? Jessica was pale. She was gripping the edge of the table so hard her knuckles were white. Shut up, Ben, she hissed. We are here to represent Mrs. Clara Reynolds, née Blackwood, Graves announced. And we are not here to contest the prenuptial agreement, Your Honor. Jessica let out a breath she didn't know she was holding. See? She whispered to Benedict. They're folding. We are here, Graves continued, his eyes locking onto Benedict's, to file a countersuit for spousal fraud, embezzlement, corporate espionage, and to issue an immediate freezing injunction on all assets held by Mr. Benedict Reynolds and Helios Tech. Objection! Jessica shrieked, jumping up. This is a divorce hearing. You can't just— I can, Graves interrupted calmly. He snapped his fingers. One of the junior lawyers behind him instantly placed a document in Jessica's hand. We have evidence that Mr. Reynolds used his wife's personal trust fund, access she unknowingly granted him via a forged power of attorney in 2018, to seed the initial capital for Helios Tech. The company isn't his. It was built with stolen money. Her money. Benedict stood up, his face red. That's a lie. She was a waitress. She didn't have a dime. Graves turned to Benedict slowly. The look of pity on his face was worse than anger. Mr. Reynolds, Graves said softly, did you really think Clara Blackwood worked at a diner because she needed the tips? That diner is on the historical registry of the Blackwood estate. She was there doing character research for her novel. She was playing a role. And you were just a prop she got tired of. Graves turned back to the judge. We have the bank trails. We have the forged signatures. And we have the witness testimony of the notary you bribed, Mr. Reynolds. We are asking for an immediate summary judgment to freeze all accounts, pending a federal audit. Federal? Benedict squeaked. The Blackwood Consortium takes theft very seriously, Graves said. The judge looked at the documents Graves had submitted. He flipped through one page, then another. His eyes widened. He looked up at Benedict, then at Jessica. Motion granted. The judge slammed his gavel. All assets of Mr. Reynolds and Helios Tech are frozen effective immediately. Ms. Vane, I suggest you get your client a criminal defense attorney. This is no longer just a family court matter. Jessica slumped into her chair. Benedict stood there, his mouth agape, as the 6 lawyers packed up their single folder and turned to leave. As Graves passed Benedict, he paused. He leaned in close. Clara sends her regards, Graves whispered. She says to enjoy the Honda. If you can keep it. Benedict stormed out of the courthouse, his mind racing. It had to be a mistake, a bluff. Clara, a Blackwood. The name sounded familiar, vaguely, like something from a history textbook or the name on a library wing. But he couldn't place it. Jessica, fix this! He screamed at her on the sidewalk. Passers-by stared. I can't just fix Alistair Graves, Ben, Jessica yelled back, her composure cracking. Do you know who that is? He defended the Crown Prince of Monaco last year. If Clara has him, she has millions. No. Billions. She's a waitress, Benedict insisted, pulling out his phone. I'm going to the office. I need to transfer the offshore funds before the freeze hits the international banks. Don't do it, Ben, Jessica warned. That's wire fraud. They'll be watching. I built that company. Nobody takes it from me. Benedict shoved past her and hailed a cab. His Uber account had just been suspended due to payment method failure. He arrived at the Helios Tech headquarters in Midtown. It was a gleaming tower of glass and steel, a monument to his ego. He marched through the lobby, ignoring the receptionist, and went straight to the executive elevator. He pressed his thumb against the biometric scanner. Beep, beep. Access denied. Benedict frowned. He wiped his thumb on his jacket and tried again. Beep, beep. Access denied. What the hell? He kicked the elevator doors. Mr. Reynolds? Benedict turned around. The receptionist, a young woman named Sophie, was standing there holding a clipboard, looking terrified. Beside her were two large security guards. Not his security guards. These men wore uniforms with a crest he didn't recognize, a stylized hawk holding a key. Sophie, why is the elevator broken? And who are these goons? Benedict demanded. Sir, there was a memo, Sophie stammered. One of the guards stepped forward. He was massive, blocking Benedict's path to the turnstiles. Mr. Reynolds, the guard said in a monotone voice, you are trespassing. Trespassing? I own this building. Benedict laughed incredulously. I pay the lease. Actually, you don't, the guard said. Helios Tech leases this building from Meridian Holdings. So, I pay Meridian every month. Meridian Holdings is a subsidiary of the Blackwood Consortium, the guard explained calmly. As of 9:30 a.m. this morning, the landlord has invoked the moral turpitude clause in your commercial lease. You are in breach of contract due to the pending criminal investigation for fraud. The lease is terminated. You have 10 minutes to collect your personal effects from the lobby. Benedict felt the blood drain from his face. The landlord? Clara was his landlord? For 5 years? He thought back to the day he signed the lease. He had bragged to Clara about the deal he got. I really squeezed them, Clara. Prime real estate for peanuts. She had just smiled over her coffee and said, That's wonderful, Ben. I'm glad you're happy with the space. She had given it to him. She had literally given him the office to play businessman in, and he had been too arrogant to check who signed the lease on the other end. This is insane, Benedict muttered. I need to get to my server room. My data is in there. The servers are property of the building until the arrears are paid, the guard said. Please leave, or we will physically remove you. Benedict pulled out his phone to call the police, but stopped. The police. If Graves was right, if the fraud investigation had already started, the police were the last people he wanted to see. He turned and ran. He ran out of his own building, out onto the busy street. He needed money. He needed cash. He had a safe deposit box at the First National Bank on Fifth Avenue. He kept emergency cash there, gold coins, passports. He sprinted 3 blocks, sweating in his expensive suit. He burst into the bank, breathless. Mr. Reynolds! The bank manager, Mr. Henderson, looked up from his desk. He didn't look happy to see him. I need into my box, Henderson. Now, Benedict panted. I'm afraid I can't do that, Mr. Reynolds, Henderson said, standing up and crossing his arms. Why not? Is it the court order? That's for the accounts. The box is private. It's not the court order, sir, Henderson said, adjusting his glasses. It's the bank policy. We were acquired this morning. Benedict stared at him. Acquired? By who? The Blackwood Financial Group purchased a controlling stake in our parent company at opening bell today, Henderson said, sounding awed. It was a hostile takeover. Took 17 minutes. Their first administrative directive was to audit all high-risk clients. Your box has been flagged for review regarding money laundering suspicions. Benedict backed away. They bought the bank. They didn't just freeze his account. They bought the bank just to lock him out of his safety deposit box. The scale of it crushed him. He wasn't fighting a bitter ex-wife. He was fighting a god. His phone buzzed. It was a text from Jessica Vane. "I'm resigning as your counsel. Hayes and Cromwell just got a call from the Bar Association regarding an ethics complaint filed by Alistair Graves. I can't lose my license for you. You're on your own. Don't contact me." Benedict stood on the sidewalk, the bustle of New York moving around him. He had no office, no home, no lawyer, no money. And then his phone rang. It was an unknown number. Trembling, Benedict answered. "Hello?" "Hello, Ben." The voice was familiar, but it didn't sound like the mouse. It didn't sound like the waitress. It sounded like a queen addressing a peasant. "Clara?" Benedict whispered. "Clara, please, let's talk. We can work this out. I love you." "Save it, Ben," Clara said. Her voice was crystal clear. She sounded like she was in a quiet room, sipping tea. "I'm just calling to let you know that I've decided to unblock your number on my personal phone, just for an hour." "Why?" Benedict asked, hope rising in his chest. "So we can negotiate?" "No," Clara said, "because I want you to know that the dinner party isn't over. You always said I didn't know how to host, Ben, that I lacked vision. So I've prepared a little surprise for you." "What surprise?" "Check the jumbo screen in Times Square, the one right above where you're standing." Benedict looked up. He was standing on the corner of 47th and 7th. Above him, the massive, curved LED screen that usually showed ads for Coca-Cola or movies flickered. It went black, then huge white text appeared. Helios Tech CEO Benedict Reynolds, the real story. And then a video began to play. It was footage from inside the penthouse, high-definition security footage. It showed Benedict screaming at Clara. It showed him throwing the papers. It showed him kicking the dog, a scene he had forgotten about. It showed him on the phone with Jessica, laughing about hiding assets. "She's a nobody. I'll leave her with nothing." Benedict's voice boomed across Times Square, amplified by the massive speakers. Tourists stopped. Traffic slowed. Hundreds of people looked up, then looked down at the man standing on the corner in the charcoal suit. Benedict Reynolds was famous, but not in the way he wanted. "Clara!" he screamed into the phone. "Turn it off. You're ruining me." "I'm not ruining you, Ben," Clara said calmly. "I'm just turning on the lights. Cockroaches hate the light." The line went dead. Benedict looked around. People were pulling out their phones, filming him. He was trending. He had wanted the world to know his name. Now they did. But the Blackwoods weren't done yet. This was just the public humiliation. The real pain, the kind that breaks a man's soul, was waiting for him in Part 5. 72 hours after the Times Square incident, Benedict Reynolds was no longer the cover model for Forbes. He was a ghost. He was staying in a Motel 6 in New Jersey under the name John Smith, paying with cash he had pawned his Patek Philippe watch to get. His face was everywhere. Memes, news cycles, late-night talk show monologues. They were calling him the billionaire beggar. He sat on the lumpy mattress, staring at the peeling wallpaper. The rage inside him had calcified into something cold and sharp. He wasn't sad anymore. He wanted blood. His burner phone buzzed. He nearly smashed it, thinking it was another reporter who had tracked him down. But the text message was simple. It was an address in the Hudson Valley, and a time, 8 p.m. "Tonight. Don't be late." It was sent from Clara's old number. Benedict felt a surge of adrenaline. This was it. She wanted to settle. The public humiliation was just a negotiating tactic to lower his price. She was ready to cut a deal to make him go away. He shaved with a cheap disposable razor, put on his only remaining suit, now wrinkled and stained, and rented a nondescript Ford sedan. The drive to the address took 2 hours. As he moved further upstate, the houses became larger, the gates taller, the woods deeper. He turned off the main road onto a private drive marked only by a small stone pillar with the letter B carved into it. The driveway wound through miles of dense forest. Finally, the trees broke, and the Blackwood estate loomed against the twilight sky. It wasn't a house. It was a fortress disguised as a mansion. Stone turrets, ivy-covered walls, and windows that glowed with a golden, intimidating light. It looked like the kind of place where governments were toppled over brandy. Benedict parked the Ford next to a line of vintage luxury cars. He walked up the massive stone steps. The heavy oak doors opened before he even knocked. Andrew, the man from the Rolls-Royce, stood there. He didn't bow this time. He didn't even blink. "Library," Andrew said. "Follow me." They walked through a foyer that was larger than Benedict's entire penthouse. The walls were lined with oil paintings of severe-looking men and women, Clara's ancestors. Benedict noticed their eyes. They all had that same penetrating stare that Clara had suddenly adopted. Andrew opened a set of double doors and stepped aside. Benedict walked into the library. It was a cavernous room filled with the smell of old paper and burning wood. A fire roared in a fireplace large enough to roast a whole pig. Sitting in a high-backed leather wing chair near the fire was an old man. He held a cane topped with a silver hawk's head. This was William Blackwood, the patriarch. Standing by the window, looking out at the darkness, was a man Benedict didn't recognize. He was tall, broad-shouldered, with scars on his knuckles and a suit that fit too tightly across his chest. This was Dominic, Clara's older brother. The one rumor said ran the family's security interests in Eastern Europe. And sitting on a velvet ottoman, sipping tea, was Clara. She looked radiant. The grey cardigan was gone. She was wearing a midnight blue silk dress that draped over her like water. She wore diamonds around her neck that Benedict knew cost more than Helios Tech's Q3 earnings. "Hello, Ben," Clara said softly. "Clara," Benedict said, trying to summon his CEO voice, though it cracked slightly. "You've had your fun. You've shamed me. You've frozen my money. Now let's talk numbers. How much to end this?" Dominic laughed. It was a dry, scraping sound. He turned from the window. "He thinks he's here to negotiate, grandfather." William Blackwood didn't look up from the fire. "He is a merchant, Dominic. Merchants always think everything is for sale." Benedict took a step forward. "I built $1 billion company. I am not some street peddler. I want half. I deserve half. Without me, Clara would still be—" "Still be what?" Clara interrupted, her eyes flashing. "A waitress." "Let's talk about that, Ben." She stood up and walked over to a desk, picking up a thick, leather-bound notebook. She tossed it to him. "Open it," she commanded. Benedict caught it. He opened the book. The pages were filled with handwriting, her handwriting. He squinted. It was code, Python, C++, complex algorithms. He flipped the pages, dates from 12 years ago. "Recognize it?" Clara asked. "That's the source code for the Helios compression algorithm, the revolutionary code you claimed you wrote in a fever dream in your garage." Benedict froze. I wrote that." "You couldn't code Hello World in HTML, Ben," Clara said, stepping closer. "I wrote it. I wrote it while you were sleeping. I wrote it while you were playing video games. I slipped the flash drives into your bag. I planted the ideas in your head during breakfast, guiding you so gently you thought you came up with them yourself. Why? Benedict whispered. Why would you do that? Because I wanted to see if you were worthy, Clara said, her voice trembling with suppressed emotion. I wanted to build something with you. I didn't care about the credit. I have the Blackwood name. I don't need fame. I wanted a partner. I wanted to see if, given success, you would stay a good man. She looked at him with profound disappointment. But money didn't change you, Ben. It just revealed you. You took the credit. Then you took the money. Then you tried to throw me away like garbage. It's my name on the patent, Benedict shouted. Actually, William Blackwood spoke for the first time, his voice like grinding stones. It isn't. The old man turned his chair. The patent office is friendly to our family. The patent you hold is a dummy, a shell. The real intellectual property is registered to the Blackwood Trust. You have been selling a licensed product for 10 years, Mr. Reynolds, and your license just expired. Benedict felt the room spinning. He didn't own the company. He didn't own the code. He didn't even own the idea. So I have nothing? Benedict asked, his voice hollow. You have your life, Dominic said, stepping forward, cracking his knuckles, which is more than you deserve after how you treated my sister. We are offering you a choice, Clara said. She pointed to the table. There was a single plane ticket and a new passport. The plane ticket is to a small island in Southeast Asia. There is a villa there. It is paid for. You will receive a monthly stipend of $2,000. You will never return to the United States. You will never speak to the press. You will disappear. And if I refuse? Benedict asked. Dominic pulled a gun from inside his jacket. It was a matte black pistol with a silencer. He checked the chamber casually. Then we skip the island, Dominic said, and we go straight to the disappear part. The woods are very deep here, Ben, and the wolves are hungry. Benedict looked at the gun, then at the ticket, then at Clara. You loved me once, he pleaded, looking into her eyes. I loved the man I thought you could be, Clara said, turning her back on him. But that man never existed. Goodbye, Benedict. She walked out of the room. Benedict looked at the ticket. Economy class. One way. He reached out, his hand shaking, and took the ticket. Wise choice, William whispered. But as Benedict walked out of that room, humiliated, broken and defeated, a dark thought bloomed in his mind. He wasn't going to the island. He knew something they didn't. He knew where Clara kept the backups. Benedict drove away from the estate, but he didn't head to the airport. He drove back toward the city, his knuckles white on the steering wheel. The fear had vanished, replaced by a manic desperation. They thought they had won. They thought he was just a cowardly merchant. But they forgot one thing. A rat fights hardest when it's cornered. He knew about the safe. 3 years ago, during a rare moment of vulnerability, Clara had shown him an old locket. She told him she kept it in a floor safe in their old vacation cabin in the Catskills, a property Benedict had forgotten about during the divorce because it was technically in her name, purchased before the marriage. But that wasn't the important part. The important part was that he had seen her put a hard drive in there too. Just old family photos, she had said. But tonight, after seeing the notebook, he knew. That wasn't photos. That was the original source code, the uncompiled, raw data, the proof that could prove he stole it. Yes, but also the only copy of the master key, the decryption algorithm that Helios Tech was based on. If he could get that drive, he could sell it to the Chinese or the Russians for $50 million on the black market. He could disappear with a fortune, not a stipend. Or better yet, he could ransom it back to the Blackwoods. He stopped at a hardware store that was open late. He bought a crowbar, a flashlight, and a heavy sledgehammer. He drove into the night, heading for the Catskills. The cabin was isolated, sitting near the edge of a frozen lake. It was snowing heavily now, a blizzard kicking up. Benedict parked the car a mile away and walked through the snow, the wind biting his face. He wanted the pain. It focused him. He reached the cabin. It was dark, abandoned. He smashed the window with the crowbar and climbed in. The air inside was stale and freezing. He clicked on his flashlight. He moved to the bedroom. He shoved the bed aside with a grunt of exertion. There, under the rug, was the floor safe. It was a digital keypad. Benedict smiled. He knew the code. It was the date they met. 10:14. He punched it in. Beep, 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 beep. The light turned green. Too sentimental, Clara, he sneered. He pulled the heavy door open. Inside there was the locket, and there, sitting in an anti-static bag, was the hard drive. Benedict grabbed it. He felt a surge of triumph. He held the heart of the Blackwood Empire in his hand. He turned to leave. Click! The lights in the cabin flared on, blinding him. Benedict threw his hands up, dropping the crowbar but clutching the drive. Sitting in the armchair in the corner of the room was Jessica Vane. She was holding a pistol, and she wasn't wearing her power suit. She was wearing tactical gear. "Hello, Ben," she said, her voice bored. "Jessica." Benedict blinked, his eyes adjusting to the light. "What are you doing here? You're working for them." "I've always worked for them, Ben," Jessica said, standing up. "Did you really think a junior partner at Hayes and Cromwell just happened to take an interest in your tech company 5 years ago? Clara hired me before I even met you." Benedict's mouth fell open. You were the mistress. We slept together." Jessica grimaced. "Hazard of the job. You were disgusting, by the way. But I had to make sure you were completely distracted while Clara moved the real assets into the offshore trusts. I was the distraction, Ben, and you were so easy to distract." "You played me," Benedict whispered. "The whole time? From day one? The divorce advice? The advice to be cruel to her? That was me, guiding you to make yourself look like a monster, so the judge would destroy you. And it worked perfectly." Benedict looked at the hard drive in his hand. "Well, it doesn't matter. I have the drive. If I don't walk out of here, this goes to the highest bidder. I have a dead man's switch set up." "Oh, shut up, Ben," Jessica sighed. "Look at the drive." Benedict looked down. On the back of the hard drive, there was a sticky note, in Clara's handwriting. It read, "For the boredom on the island." "Say, it's not the code, Ben," Jessica said. "It's movies. Clara loaded it with your favorite action movies. She knew you'd come here. She knew you couldn't resist one last try to steal from her. She wanted you to have something to watch in exile." Benedict stared at the drive. It was a toy, a parting gift, a final joke. "She predicted everything," Benedict said, his voice trembling. "She's a Blackwood," Jessica said, raising the gun. "They play chess while you're playing checkers. Now drop it." Benedict dropped the drive. It clattered on the floor. "Andrew is outside," Jessica said. "He's going to drive you to the airport. You're going to get on that plane. And if you ever try to contact Clara again, Dominic won't use a silencer next time." Benedict looked at Jessica. "Does she hate me that much?" Jessica shook her head. "No, Ben. That's the sad part. She doesn't hate you at all. She pities you. You had a queen, and you wanted a groupie. Now get out." Benedict walked out of the cabin, into the snow. Andrew was waiting by the Rolls-Royce, the engine running. Benedict got in. He didn't look back. As the car drove away, Jessica walked to the window and dialed a number. "He's secured, Miss Blackwood," Jessica said. "He's en route to the airport." "Thank you, Jessica," Clara's voice came through. "Is he okay?" "He's broken," Jessica said. "Good," Clara said. "Then he can finally start to heal. Maybe the island will make a man out of him yet." "You're too kind to him," Jessica noted. "Perhaps," Clara said. "But the divorce isn't quite over yet. There's one last loose end. The woman who leaked the photos to the press. My cousin, Isabella." "Isabella?" Jessica asked. "She betrayed the family. She tried to take the throne while I was distracted with Ben," Clara said, her voice turning to ice. "She thought if I was embroiled in a scandal, Grandfather would disown me and name her the heir." "What are we going to do?" Jessica asked. "Ben was the appetizer, Jessica," Clara said. "Isabella is the main course. Prepare the jet. We're going to London." The private jet touched down at Heathrow Airport under a blanket of grey fog. Clara Blackwood stepped onto the tarmac, the damp London air filling her lungs. She wasn't wearing the Target cardigan anymore. She was wearing a bespoke trench coat, dark sunglasses, and heels that clicked with authority on the pavement. She wasn't just Clara Reynolds, the divorcee. She wasn't even just Clara Blackwood, the heiress. Today, she was coming to claim the title of the matriarch. "The car is ready, ma'am," Andrew said, holding the door of a silver Bentley. "Take us to the Shard," Clara said. "The board meeting starts in 40 minutes." In the penthouse boardroom of the Shard, overlooking the winding Thames, Isabella Blackwood was smiling. She was Clara's cousin, blonde, polished, and venomous. She sat at the head of the long mahogany table, surrounded by the 12 members of the Blackwood Global Board. "It is truly tragic," Isabella sighed, feigning sadness as she slid a copy of a tabloid magazine across the table. The cover showed Benedict Reynolds being arrested for trespassing. Clara has clearly lost control of her personal life. A husband in exile? A public spectacle in Times Square? It shows a lack of discretion, a lack of stability. One of the board members, an elderly man named Lord Hayes, nodded gravely. "It is embarrassing, Isabella. The family name is being dragged through the mud." "Exactly," Isabella said, leaning forward. "Which is why I am calling for a vote of no confidence. Clara is emotionally compromised. She is unfit to inherit the chairmanship from Grandfather. I am prepared to step in and steady the ship." "Are you?" The voice came from the doorway. The heavy glass doors slid open. Clara walked in. She didn't look unstable. She looked terrifying. She was flanked by Jessica Vane and Dominic. "Clara," Isabella sneered, though her eyes flickered with nervousness. "We were just discussing your messy little divorce. I didn't think you'd show your face." "My divorce is handled, Isabella," Clara said, walking to the opposite end of the table. She didn't sit. She stood, placing her hands on the wood. "Benedict was a mistake, a 10-year lapse in judgment. I corrected it. That is what leaders do. They fix mistakes." "You created a circus," Isabella snapped. "The press is having a field day." "The press is printing exactly what I told them to print," Clara said calmly. "I own the publishing house, Isabella. Did you forget?" Clara signaled to Jessica. Jessica opened her briefcase and began distributing dossiers to the board members. "You see," Clara continued, her voice dropping an octave, "while I was busy cleaning up my life, I noticed something interesting in the London accounts. Discrepancies. Little leaks in the hull of our ship." Isabella went pale. "I don't know what you're talking about." "Page 4, Clara commanded the board. The board members flipped the page. gasps echoed around the room. "It seems," Clara said, locking eyes with her cousin, "that someone has been funneling Blackwood capital into a shell company in the Caymans, a company that, coincidentally, just purchased a villa in Tuscany and a yacht named the Bella." "That's a lie." Isabella stood up, knocking her chair over. "Those are fabricated." "They are bank records, Isabella," Dominic said from the corner, crossing his arms. "And I have the recordings of your phone calls authorizing the transfers. You got sloppy. You thought Clara was too busy crying over Benedict to notice you stealing the silver." Clara walked slowly toward Isabella. The room was silent. "You wanted the throne, Isabella," Clara whispered, stopping inches from her cousin's face. "But you forgot the first rule of this family. We don't steal from each other. We steal from the world for each other." Isabella looked around the room. The board members were looking at her with disgust. Lord Hayes closed his folder. "I move to strip Isabella Blackwood of her board seat and all voting rights immediately," Lord Hayes said. "Seconded," another member said. "All in favour?" 12 hands went up. "You can't do this!" Isabella screamed. "I'm family!" "You were," Clara said cold-heartedly. "Now you're a liability." Clara pointed to the door. "Security will escort you out. You have 1 hour to vacate your London residence. Your accounts have been frozen. A little trick I picked up recently. You'll receive a stipend, same as Benedict. I hear barley is nice this time of year. Maybe you two can start a club for people who underestimated me." Isabella looked at Clara with pure hatred, but she knew she was beaten. She grabbed her purse and stormed out, sobbing. Clara watched her go. Then she turned to the empty chair at the head of the table. She walked over to it. She sat down. It was comfortable. It felt right. She looked out the window at the city of London, spread out below her. She had lost a husband. She had lost a cousin. But she had found herself. "Shall we begin?" Clara asked the board. "Yes, Madam Chairman." The room chorused in unison. Clara Blackwood smiled. The mouse was gone. The lioness had eaten, and the reign of the Queen had just begun. "So what do you think? Did Benedict deserve the island? Did Isabella deserve to lose everything?" This story reminds us that sometimes the quietest people in the room are the ones holding all the power. Benedict thought he was breaking a helpless wife, but he was actually waking up a sleeping giant. It's a lesson in humility, loyalty, and the terrifying power of a woman who has finally had enough. If you enjoyed this story of hard karma and ultimate revenge, please smash that like button. It really helps the channel grow. And don't forget to subscribe and hit the notification bell so you never miss a story. I want to know in the comments, if you were Clara, would you have given Benedict the money, or would you have sent him to the island too? Let me know below. Thanks for watching, and see you in the next video.